Hello and welcome. I'm Eric Gao, and here's what happened this week. Taiwan's lawmakers remain deeply divided over this year's budget. They failed to agree on a single one of the more than 3,000 items up for discussion. John Van Schiff reports on how tempers are flaring.
Shouting and name-calling in the legislature as partisan grievances flare. Lawmakers have almost 3,300 budgetary items to clear for the year ahead, from military spending to the budget on media, including TaiwanPlus. And they've yet to get on the same page about even one of them. When they reconvene later Thursday, the temperature is unlikely to come down. Controversial recent bills affecting things like the Constitutional Court have the ruling Democratic Progressive Party and the chief opposition party, the Kuomintang, at each other's throats. Both sides are now threatening each other with a nuclear option, a mass nationwide recall campaign. They hope to wipe out the opponent's caucus. These threats helped derail Wednesday's attempt at budget talks.
But this wasn't
the only loss of cool during the meeting. And Taiwan's third party, the Taiwan People's Party, is angry at the DPP too. It's incensed at what it sees as the politically motivated corruption charges against its founder, Ko Wen-je. Now, it's also angry at accusations its proposed 3% military budget cut is motivated by sympathy for China. The party says the military budget has gone down steadily under the rule of both the other parties. There was some substantive discussion. On the defense budget, there was debate about how much to spend on Taiwan's domestic submarine program. But here, too, disagreement about the facts, in this case, how much the defense minister had asked for, brought talks to a halt.
他只要用2亿，为什么要编一个20亿？所以18亿的冻结是这样子来的。但是呢，铺天盖地的这些网军跟侧翼啊，一直在攻击我们。
顾部长认可潜舰预算冻结18亿元的相关共识的一个内容，并非事实。国防部立场始终未曾改变，即为争取预算全数通过。
With no progress, Speaker Han Kuo-yu called a recess until Thursday. But the fraught political atmosphere isn't going away, and it could be some time before lawmakers can cool down enough to start making a dent in the significant amount of work ahead of them. Joseph Wu and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan has executed its first prisoner in 5 years. Death row inmate Huang Lingkai was sentenced for the 2013 killing of his ex-girlfriend and her mother. He was executed Thursday night by shooting. It's the first execution since President Lai Ching-te took office last year. 36 inmates remain on death row. Taiwan's Constitutional Court last year ruled that the death penalty was only partly constitutional and it should only be used for the most serious crimes. Taiwan's military is inviting companies to propose designs for a new series of uncrewed ships. This is part of efforts by the Navy to modernize its fleet to counter increasing Chinese aggression in the Taiwan Strait. Jaime Okan reports.
Taiwan's Navy is looking for private sector help to modernize its fleet. On Tuesday, the military reported 24 Chinese fighter jets operating near the country, along with 6 naval ships. This daily pressure around Taiwan's maritime border is pushing its armed forces to explore new ways to boost its defense capabilities. The Navy is now looking to private companies to design and develop new uncrewed ships capable of laying and clearing sea mines. Lawmakers from the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, are also encouraging the use of new tech to boost Taiwan's defense.
因为沁附案造成我国海军取得扫雷猎雷的能量往后延，鼓励海军用新的科技，用无人舰艇来进行扫雷，也会持续监督在招标跟研制的过程，不容许有任何的弊端产生。
Taiwan's Navy uses a variety of old U.S. warships that have been upgraded and refurbished as Taiwan tries to develop its own shipbuilding industry. but much of its fleet is more than 30 years old, and there are concerns over how effective these ships would actually be in a conflict with China. Analysts at Taiwan's government-backed think tank, the INDSR, say fewer ships and a shift to uncrewed vessels could be a good first step to modernizing the Navy.
你用也许数量少一点的船，就能够执行更长时间、更大范围的这样子的任务。它可以自动化操作的话，可能就要解决，就是说，例如它船只本身自己的可能是定位的那个能力，跟对于周边这个海况觉察的这样子的能力。
But to truly modernize, observers say that Taiwan's Navy might need to change its strategy, shifting to weapons like sea mines that can disrupt an adversary and boost Taiwan's deterrence against Chinese ships.
Sea mines are really challenging for any Navy to deal with because you have to locate them, you have to clear them. If a ship hits one of them, it's blocking the path. And the question then becomes for Taiwan is how do you very quickly deliver those mines when needed?
The bidding process for the new uncrewed ships will conclude in just over a month. And for now, Taiwan's Navy awaits proposals from local companies to support its military modernization efforts. Fu Huahong in Haimyokan for TaiwanPlus.
China is preparing to let more of its residents travel here to Taiwan. Beijing's Culture and Tourism Ministry says it is considering letting residents of Fujian Province and Shanghai go on group tours here in the near future. Two-way tourism has largely been banned for several years, though China started allowing residents of the coastal city of Xiamen to travel to Taiwan's Jingmen and Matsu Islands last year. Taiwan's government has welcomed the announcement, but says it will need to see details before any concrete steps are taken. Taiwan's largest company, TSMC, has reported record revenue of almost $27 billion for the fourth quarter of 2024. Our reporter Chris Gorin was at the earnings conference in Taipei, where the company downplayed concerns about U.S. export controls on AI chips.
The world's largest chipmaker has reported record earnings for its last quarter of 2024, making it the company's biggest year yet. At its earnings conference here in Taipei, TSMC reported fourth quarter revenue of nearly $27 billion, a nearly 39% increase over the same period last year, while net income increased nearly 60%. 2024 was eventful for Taiwan's largest company, which saw big progress on its expansion in countries like the U.S. and Japan. It's responsible for producing more than 90% of the world's most advanced chips. And TSMC says that chips for high-performance computing, driven largely by AI, was by far its biggest area of growth last year. But there have also been hiccups. The company was found to have violated U.S. export controls when its chips were found in a processor made by Chinese tech company Huawei. And overnight, the U.S. announced a fresh round of regulations, which many believe are aimed at preventing such incidents from happening again. However, Chairman and CEO C.C. Wei said they do not expect the controls to significantly impact their operations. Wei also responded to news that Taiwan appears to have lifted restrictions on its most advanced 2-nanometer production outside of Taiwan, perhaps allowing production at its Arizona fab, and whether the next advancement in chips might premiere in its overseas facilities.
Ramping up, introduce a new technology into manufacturing. The fab, the process is so complicated, so it has to be very close to the R&D people. We want to ramp up the same kind of technology in U.S., but that practically is a little bit difficult. So Taiwan will always be first.
The company is dealing with both record growth and political uncertainty, but it's optimistic that its winning streak can continue. Kamashu and Chris Gorin in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Japanese startup iSpace has successfully launched its lunar lander from a NASA site in the United States. This sends the firm on its way to become Asia's first private company to reach the moon. On the lander is also a Taiwan-made probe that's vying to make history itself. Joyce Sung has more.
It's been all cheers here at the Space Science and Engineering Department at National Central University in Taoyuan, which is about an hour's drive from Taipei. Astronomy students and professors are celebrating the launch of an unmanned SpaceX rocket from Florida, which for the first time is carrying 2 lunar landers, which will take their own paths to the moon once it reaches orbit. One of them is Japanese startup iSpace's lander called Resilience, which is also carrying Taiwan's first ever probe expected to make it to the moon. Eyes have been glued to this screen, a live feed of the view from the launch site, NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Students and professors in this department have a very personal stake in the mission as the makers of the Taiwanese payload. Their Deep Space Radiation Probe, or DSRP, is attached to the exterior of the Japanese lander, exposed directly to space.
We had a smooth launch the first time, which is very nice. Doesn't always happen, but we launched successfully the first time. Launch is just the beginning of the mission, so there's a lot more to go. But we're really excited to be able to go beyond low Earth orbit, go to the moon, and hopefully be Taiwan's first successful lunar payload on the moon.
The DSRP measures radiation doses and other aspects of the harsh environments between the Earth and the moon and on the moon itself. This is all important information to help build better spacecraft for deep space in the future, as well as to help astronauts survive it. For iSpace, this is a mission of redemption. Its first attempt in 2023 ended with the lander crashing on the lunar surface. Now, the Resilience lander is expected to reach the moon in about 4 months. Taiwan's probe, though, is already on the clock, taking its measurements and unlocking the path to deep space for Taiwan and other countries around the world. Howard Zhang, Kama Shu, and Joyce Sun in Taoyuan for TaiwanPlus.
Former employees will get compensation for the suffering they say came from working at a U.S. company's former plant in northern Taiwan. But the workers' lawyers say the latest court ruling may not be the end of a toxic chemicals case that has dragged on for decades. John Van Trieste reports.
Compensation is on the way for workers who say they've suffered from exposure to toxic chemicals between the 1970s and early 90s. A new high court ruling awards more than $5 million to the remaining 200-odd employees of the former Taoyuan plant of the now defunct Radio Corporation of America. But this doesn't look like the end of a class action lawsuit that's been smoldering away for 20 years. RCA was a major electronics maker which chose Taiwan as a production site at a time of low wages and loose regulations. It was only after the company left Taiwan that the public became aware of the scale of the toxic pollution it left behind. Former workers say years of handling chemicals inside the plant has left them with cancer and other ailments, and that chemicals are also to blame for the early deaths of dozens of colleagues.
从我们的步伐可以稳健的到现在，已经是步履蹒跚。从我们的黑发到现在的白发，其中有些会员因为等不及就先走了。 今天有了判赔，可是其实那个金额真的不高。
The new court ruling is the latest in a series of wins the workers have had since 2015, but it isn't a total victory. The court says the 222 plaintiffs had not suffered obvious damage to their health, just to their right of what it calls their physical integrity. The payout is also far less than the $33 million the plaintiffs sought, something that has proven hard to swallow.
我们当初为了台湾的经济起飞，我们牺牲了我们的健康权，那结果换来我们这一生这些病痛。那最痛恨的就是我们卵巢癌，还有内膜癌，还有很多的什么心脏各等的这些症状，就是被认为这特殊的就不承认。
And so, workers' lawyers say the fight may continue.
他似乎认为没有健康权的侵害，那这一点我们是有一点怀疑，这样对吗？那我们觉得。 对这件事情，我们会律师团跟这个自救会会跟这些顾问工商协会会讨论要不要上诉。
The question is how far lawyers can go in redressing what's become known as one of Taiwan's major modern environmental scandals. Andy Xue and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
And thank you for watching. Here's what happened. Finally, we take you to Taiwan's Pine Garden in Hualien. That's a Japanese-era building that has been restored and recently reopened to the public. I'm Eric Gao. Take care, and we'll see you next week.